going to be in laws of nature through the success of our soldiers that come back healthy back home. Anyways, guys, what we're going to learn is Hasidic stuff. I'm really doing it on trial basis. Let me know if you guys like the subject. I try to choose something which is easier. There are easier ones too. But this one is actually in a different point of view. Why did God send us in this world? Famous question. Ramchal asks. It's going to have a Hasidic philosophy behind it. If it's too difficult, if you don't like it, please let me know. I don't want this class to fall apart because lack of interest. We could change something else. Anyways, this book is written by Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe. He was 16 when he wrote this book. And he sounds like a Kabbalist of 100 years old. He was definitely a genius. Look what it says. The mitzvah talks about Priya Verivya, mitzvah that you have to have children. I just thought I saw you. Must be your brother. So I guess I don't know if I have enough copies. If you could share with somebody. Okay. So the mitzvah, the first mitzvah of Torah is prove we should have children. Now let's see what that means in the Hasidic philosophy. Prove, you have it? You guys already could have pens and just bring your pens if you want to take notes. Okay. A lot of pens is broken, so it's broken, so I bought it cheaper. No, I'm just kidding. Can you open this? Oh, no brains. Anyway, so the mitzvah is mitzvah pruvu, that you have to have children. So it says hine, you have it, guys? Hine amru razal. But we got to concentrate because this has a lot of deep stuff in there. Hine amru razal, the rabbis told us, if I go too fast, please let me know. Shloisha shutfim ba'adam. When a child is created, a child has three partners. What are the three partners in Gemara Kiddushin? Av, Mazriya, Loiven. It says the father, actually, from the father comes the white, the sperm, I guess that's what it means. And what comes from that Loiven, from that white stuff, Shemimenu atzomes vegidim. The bones of the child is created from the father's part. Gidim are the sinews, vetzipornaim, the nails, umoyach sheberoishoy, the brain in the head. So you get your brains from your father's part. The levin shebain, and the white of the eye. So this comes from the father's side. Em mazriya, what comes from the mother? Oidem, the redness, I guess the redness of the meat. The redness, shemimenu oiru basar, the skin and the meat come from there. So we know the father's part and the mother's part. Some part of the body come from the father, some come from the egg of the mother. Now what does God do? Who's the third partner? HaKadosh Baruch Hu noisem b'ruach u'neshama. God is the one that puts a soul in us. Right? I'm sure you know the Gemara in Kiddushin. If somebody honors his father and mother, it's like he's honoring God. One of the logics, and if Chas v'Shalom we disrespect our parents, it's like we're disrespecting God, because these three are partners: father, mother, and God. If you disrespect one partner, it's like disrespecting all three partners. If you honor one, it's like honoring all three of them. Okay, so this is the Gemara. You're going on the second paragraph. It's known based on what it's written. The neshamis ani asisi. It says in the pasuk, "I created souls." It's a pasuk in Yeshaya, I think. If you learn it simply, God is talking about many, many people, and He says, "I created all the souls." But in Arizal doesn't learn it that way. There's Arizal. His student was Rab Chaim Vital. He doesn't learn it that way because in the beginning of the pasuk says, "Ruach milefana yatov." A spirit, one spirit, will humble before me. So it's talking about one person, right? It doesn't say ruchot, it says ruach milfana yatov. And right after it says neshamot, I made souls more than one. That means for that one person, for that one ruach, God created at least two souls. So what are the two souls that we have? Very famous thing. When you go to Chabad, you talk about it right and left. In the language of the Gemara, it's called Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. But let's see how Kabbalah calls it. It says neshamot and yositi, that God makes for every person. Two neshamot, sheyesh ba'adam beis nefashes. By person, there are two souls. What is it? One is nefesh habahamit, the animalistic soul, meaning our natural soul. In the language of the Gemara is the Yetzer Hara. Now, why do we call it the animalistic soul? It's not vicious. It's not ISIS, I promise you. It's not Hamas. Our animal is not like that. What it means is an animal basically wants everything for his own sake. He only sees himself and his needs. So this is like the selfish part of us. The animalistic soul only sees himself, and just like an animal only goes after physical, pleasurable things, that side of us goes after physical pleasures, eating, drinking, sleeping in, sitting and talking, saying nonsense. So one nefesh that we have is called the animalistic soul. Hamitlabeshet bedam ha'adam. That animal soul is actually enclosed in the blood. That's why naturally as a kid, if our father brings the food late, we cry. If I don't learn Torah one day, it's bad, but I don't cry. How come I complain more about not paying my mortgage and not eating food? But I don't complain if I didn't learn Torah one day, because this is our natural soul. The animalistic soul is enclosed in the blood that gives me life. This is my nature. I'm more close to that, you understand? Because that's included in my blood. The gam hi sichlit. Now, even though we call it animal soul, it's not an animal just full of emotions. It's very intellectual too. So our animalistic side has a lot of intellect also. Lahaskel kol mina chochma shevolam. With that animal soul that has intellect, he understands all the worldly wisdoms, science, mathematics. You could be a very smart genius. So again, we don't call it animal soul because it's emotional only or because it's vicious, God forbid. No, it just sees his needs and he goes after the physical pleasures, just like an animal. But it doesn't have to be bad, it's not evil. Where does it come from? If you guys learn the book of Ramchal, is it getting too difficult? No. Oh, lights out.
Very good. Sorry.
We try to make it as interesting as possible. If you look at the Ramchal says nothing starts in this world. Everything starts in the spiritual world. We all have a root that's in the spiritual world. In the language of Chachamim, it's called Mazal. It's our Mazal, means our source. And then he calls it Kochot. The Ramchal calls it Kochot, certain powers. And above that are the angels. So anything that happens, or in this world, really the root is in the spiritual world. If you want to see where the Tanakh talks about it, anybody study the book of Daniel? Daniel? You ever learned it in yeshiva? So I just don't want to scare you. Your wives might know Tanakh more than you. Because, not I don't mean you, I mean any man. Because in the yeshiva, they're just busy teaching us Gemara and Musar. They never really bother that much to teach us Tanakh. But the girls don't learn Gemara. So really, they teach them Tanakh pretty well if it's a good school. So it happens to be they know Tanakh better than us. They might know, all the Rambans in the Torah. And we barely know the Rashis. So if you're going to have a wife who's a bigger Talmid Chacham than you, when it comes to Tanakh, so appreciate it. So now why did I say that? Anyways, so the Tanakh talks about in the book of Daniel, Daniel Hanavi saw the future exile. And he says, I was standing and I saw this huge animal with a big head and bunch of horns coming out of his head, attacking, and then another angel came and knocked him out. So Rashi really explains, these are talking about the 4 exiles. And these animals are really root of the nations. For example, I don't know, the Persian Empire at that time was compared to one type of an animal. These are angels. And over there, they say, the Chachamim tell us, before a nation falls off, their angel in heaven has to fall off, which gives them the livelihood and sustenance. So once that angel in the spiritual world falls off, gets defeated, then that nation on earth gets defeated too. Isn't that interesting? Nothing starts from here. It starts from spiritual worlds. So now, if I have an animal soul, where is the root of that animal soul? In the spiritual world. So look what it says. He says, when nimshechet, it's drawn down, milmaila, from above, mikochot ruchnim, from its spiritual source. Ubechinat pnei shor shebemerkava. Upnei adam le'arba'atan. So what happens is, they say Yecheskel saw a chariot. It was a vision. There was not really a chariot there. And he says the chariot had 4 wheels. One wheel had the shape of a face of an eagle. The other one had a face of a lion. The other one had a face of an ox. And the other one had a face of a human being. And on top of that, there was sitting the supernal human being. which means God, was sitting on top of the chariot. Now, all these animals in the bottom, these are the angels that, so to speak, they were carrying the chariot of God, whatever that means. I'm not going into it. I don't know it myself. But he says like this. What is so? These are angels. The one that actually looks like had a shape of a lion in the vision of Yecheskel. Lion is the king, lion king, right? King of the jungle. So all the vicious animals, all the beasts, that's a root. That angel is a root to all the beasts, right? Where is the ox? So ox is the king of the domestic animals. All the domestic animals, the root is from that angel. Right? What's the eagle? The eagle is like the root of all the birds, all the poultry, so to speak. And then the Adam, which was the human face, which was the fourth chariot, from that intellect of human being comes. So these are our roots. But then he says also the animal soul of us comes from the ox. So the emotional part comes from that angel that looks like an ox, and the intellect comes from the shape, the face of the human. Why do we come from ox, not from the lion? Because even our animalistic soul is kosher. Seriously. I'm going to explain that in a second. What it means. Your animal soul is different than somebody else's animal soul. Jewish animal soul is still kosher, as we see later on. So he explains. Let's go one more time. And the second paragraph, the third line, it comes from above. Our animal soul comes from spiritual powers, from the face of the ox, that was one of the angels. Why did he have shape of an ox? Because all the domestic animals and our animal soul comes from the Shebe Merkava and the chariot. Upnei Adam le'arbatan. It says that actually the human face was with all the four legs of the chariot too. So from that human, like there was an ox, but had the shape of a human next to it. Whatever the explanation is. So it says, so our intellect comes from the Pnei Adam, the face of the person. Shemimanu nimshachim nefashot habahamit shebisrael. Our animal soul comes from there. Now I wanted to explain, what do we mean that the animal soul of a Jew is different? Might sound like a racism a little bit, but honestly, you see it. You see what happens is there is a Gemara that says, I'm going to use Oved Avodah Zarah, people that worship idols. But I wanted to understand it is more general. It's all the Ummah Sa'ilam. I don't want to go into English words too much. What happens is, imagine I see a poor person. The Gemara says, Chesed le'umim chatas. The nations that worship idols, when they do kindness, the kindness is a sin. Why? So the Gemara explains in Baba Basra, it's a Gemara in Baba Basra, because they don't really help because they care about you. They're helping you to make their name greater. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Arab world. Seriously. They don't care, they go kill each other. They just do fun. They kill each other, that's it. When Israel is the enemy, they all become suddenly united. They really don't do it because they care about the other person. You saw what Hamas did when they took Gaza, right? They took the Fatah guys, tied their hands, and threw them from the roof. Now the latest news that's happening is because Hamas is being crushed. All the Fatah guys that live in Fatah, the PLO, they're under Mahmoud Abbas. They're not Hamas. So because Hamas is getting crushed, so they're actually killing the Hamas guys. They killed 60 of them. Yeah, they took guns and they killed them. That's it. Because Hamas is not allowing the civilians to go to the south for Israel to do the ground incursion. So these Fatah guys got angry, just killed 60 of them.
Fatah is still Muslim?
The Fatah is Mahmoud Abbas on West Bank.
Oh,
And so again, the Gaza was supposed to go on the West Bank, but the Hamas came to kill all the Fatah guys, and that was it. And anyway, obviously they don't care about each other. They just care about themselves. But when it comes to a Jew, actually, when you help a poor man, it's not because you want to make your name greater, because you actually feel bad for him. And that's from your animal soul, not from your godly soul. Your godly soul wants to help the other person because God said so, not because you just feel bad. Because if I help somebody because I feel bad, my emotions are limited. I might help him in a certain situation. If he hurts me, I'm not going to help him. But if I'm my godly soul, he helps because God wants. So remember, your animal soul is different. It's still kosher. That's why it says it comes from the face of the ox. Do you ever know that? Even the animal soul of a Jew is holier than the nations that worship idols. I can't say it everywhere, you know what I'm saying? But that's what it is. So now, Benefesh Hashem is what's our second soul. Whatever he calls it the second soul. Why is the animal soul the first soul and the godly soul the second one?
It's more dominant.
Which one is more dominant?
Animal.
Exactly, because animal soul came first. Animal soul comes as soon as you leave your mother's stomach. The godly soul starts entering when you get the circumcision, but only a little bit. When you turn 13, the godly soul completely comes in you. So it's second coming into your body. You had a question?
Didn't Hashem create um the what's the animal and what was the other one?
The godly soul?
The godly soul first?
Well, it could be, but again, it doesn't enter your body right away. You don't get your godly soul till you're 13, and it grew when she's 12. And the reason why God did that, because if they both would enter your body at the same time, the godly soul is so holy that it would defeat the animal soul.
What do you mean you don't have desires when you're 8 years old?
The opposite. You have more desires to physical things,
Exactly. You
not
said
to
it doesn't-
godly
You
things.
said it doesn't join till you're 13.
Fully.
Fully. Oh, fully.
Comes a little bit. If God would be, a girl becomes bas mitzvah a year earlier.
Five for girls, it's less than that.
They mature faster.
And they mature a year faster.
Really, even scientists figure it out. They say
Yeah,
girls usually
it's-
become mature at 19 because they check, the brain over in the front.
It's
Whatever
crazy
it's
that they
called.
knew that so long ago. Shout to science and stuff.
God told that to Moshe. But it says boys, they mature between 19 to 25. You're 6 years behind girls. That's why actually when you get married, usually the men are older. It's not just because he has to make the money. So at 19, he didn't make enough money. That's a Persian version. But the truth is because we haven't matured yet to take care of somebody else. But girls at age of 19, 20, they're ready to become a wife and a mother. So that's why we enjoy playing Nintendo at an older age more than girls. I guess. I don't. It says, "V'nefesh Hashem is Beisrael." What about our second soul? Ichelek Hashem mimal. The second soul is part of God. Your godly soul is actually part of God, which is within you. How do you know that's part of God? So it brings a very fantastic proof from the Torah. K'tiv, it says in one place, that's by Moshe Rabbeinu. He says it in Parshat Azinu. God says regarding a Jew, Chelek Hashem Amon. He says his nation, the Jewish people, are part of God. No, it's not an exaggeration. He's not talking about the physical body, he's talking about the godly soul. Godly soul is part of God, which is put into you. You get that? That's why he called you created in the image of God. Because your soul is part of God, has the image of God in it. It's a small spark from God Himself. Where does that come from? We said, Yechezkel saw a chariot, so there was a human being sitting, there was a vision of human being sitting on the chariot. That was vision of God. God is called the supernal man, so to speak.
Why would it be a human being?
What it means is because a human being has 10 faculties. You have your brains, chokhmah, bina, da'at, and then you have 7 emotions. So God, when He reveals Himself with His faculties, He has 10 faculties that are infinite. God's wisdom is infinite. So just like you have 10 faculties, that level has 10 faculties too. So they call it the supernal man, because not limited like us. Who married Dmut Kvod Hashem, that's God's honor. That's what the Torah says. B'Tselem Elokim Asayta Adam. We learned it last week in the Parsha. When God created Adam, it says Adam Arishon was created in the image of God. How? Because his soul is part of God. When you look at another Jew, you see a godly person. He might not look that way, but he has godliness within him. It says because the 10 faculties that we have, and bidmut parts of Adam al derech mashal. So it says those 10 faculties look like a human being. I don't want to get into this because it's going to be very Kabbalistic. So the neshama that comes into us, it also has the faculty of the supernal man, which is the 10 faculties that we have. It's going to get easier soon. Just like the body has 613 limbs, the neshama also has 613 spiritual limbs. And you have that in the godly world too. Roshkasu Beschaim, Sheklolot HaNeshamot Yachad Hem Adam Echad Malbish La'adam D'Sfiras. As it says in Kabbalistic books, that really all the Jewish souls are one. All of us make one gigantic body. And that actually is in the image of God Himself. The Nefesh Elokit Mitlabeshet B'Nefesh HaBahamis. Now, how does the godly soul come into your body? So the animal soul is enclosed into your blood. Because animal soul is more physical. It could be enclosed in the blood. The godly soul is part of God. It can't go straight into your blood. So it goes through the animal soul into your blood. Because the animal soul is still a bit spiritual. Are you confused yet? Good, because I'm confused. I hope it's not boring, because otherwise I want to change the subject. Anyways, it's going to get a lot easier. It says the godly soul also has 613 limbs. And he goes into the animal soul, which has also 613 spiritual limbs. And through the animal soul, he goes into your physical body. Our physical body is similar to the 613 spiritual limbs that the soul has. It says in Zohar that our physical world is very similar to the spiritual world. So now that we got confused, let's go to the unconfused part. But you got it in general, right? You got two souls. You got an animal soul that it comes from the lower angels, then you have our godly soul, which is part of God. And how do we know that? Because it says the Jew is part of God. Is actually another, and also in Bresh it says B'Tselem Elokim. Is also another explanation that they bring. It says when God created the world, correct? It says Vayomer Elokim. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Don't open that. I think I want to make something. Yeah, we come. Yes, they're bringing my credit card back. Don't beat us up. You guys, by the way, ever learn this stuff?
Abba, if someone has a what the
They brought us the food. Thank you, guys.
heck? If someone has a part of God in them, how can they do bad? God is so good.
Because it's hidden. Because the animal soul covers it, and you're not aware of it. That's a problem.
But just a little piece of God within you.
But it's covered up. It's like diamond covered up with mud. So that's through working hard, doing Torah mitzvot, getting away from sin. So it gets more and more real. Okay, guys, we're middle of a class. Excuse me. The high school boys, guys, please, we're middle of learning. Thank you. Your copies here. Your brother.
Right, so we can do this. You want to see?
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, guys, you ready? You see, he had a very good question. He asked me a question. If you have part of God in you, how could you go against God? So the answer is like a diamond that's covered with mud. You don't see the diamond shining. Because the godly soul is enclosed in the animal soul, our body is more aware of the animal side of us. We have to break through the animal to feel the godliness. And that comes through doing mitzvot, keeping away from sins.
If I have a blood transfusion with the Gadol Ador, will you bless it?
It might, but I'll be honest with you, babe, you actually remind me of a good question. It says, let's say, if you have to go to get blood, you don't know what's in the blood bank. There's a bunch of goyim, that eat non-kosher food. So will that have an effect on you? They say yes. So why do they allow you to get blood from a blood bank? Because to save life, you do anything.
So it has an effect on you.
Definitely. Yeah, I saw it in the Rebbe's answer.
Does affect you, you're saying?
Yeah.
If you take
But
a
the
non,
animalistic, no, the animalistic is in the blood. No?
so it's right, but by a goy is worse. Because he eats non-kosher food. I guess it becomes more challenging to be aware of
So it
godliness.
works the other way also. If you have
Yeah.
tzaddik,
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure it does.
God mentioned it. He said, "Citizens in danger." So, does Hashem take away the animalistic part because He said you?
I don't think so. But again, you're allowed to do it to save lives. Anyway, so the Zohar says the physical world is very similar to the spiritual world. Okay, guys, so let's go through a very interesting point now. It's going to bring a very, very interesting question. You're holding this third paragraph on the first page. To understand all this, what is this? You have a godly soul, you have an animalistic soul. You know what's going on over here. Inyan Pulas Adam Beshas has Zivuk to understand this. Again, we're not going to learn this part, but it says, what do we accomplish when we are having relations with our spouses? When you bring the soul down. Because when husband and wife are together, they obviously create a soul that eventually will come into the body. To understand that, I don't think we're going to get that far. But it said, the $1,000,000 question. Why in the world did God bring our souls down to this physical world? What's the problem with that? Lama, what is it for? You see what? It's a real, real serious question. What in the world did God have in mind? He says, if you study, where was the neshama before it came down to our physical body? He was standing in the spiritual worlds. His pleasure was understanding the light of God. It says regarding Eliyahu Hanavi, Chai Hashem, it says, I swear by God's name, I was standing before him. That's the neshama of Eliyahu Hanavi, before he came down. So the neshama is standing in front of God, but at a very high spiritual level, and he only enjoys godliness. Believe me, it doesn't enjoy potato. He doesn't enjoy the hamburger we're going to have tonight. It doesn't interest him. It's like, I go to the toilet, I need toilet. No human being does that. For the godly soul, physical pleasures are like dirt. So why would God send the neshama to such physical body that, we waste our life? So it says, either it was in the godly world. There's a world that's called Atzilut, which is the actually infinite world. Over there, God's wisdom is infinite. And it's called Atzilut because it comes from the word Etzel, which means close. It's a very godly word. Or there are lower worlds, the word of Bria, Yetzira, Vasiya. These are all spiritual worlds that we're not going to get into it. But Neshama are not in the same level. Like Neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu comes from a higher level. Our neshama comes from a lower level. Why would God bring the neshama so low into such a coarse body? The body doesn't feel godliness. We don't. I could sit and watch a movie, I don't get tired. And I could watch it 3-4 times and I don't get tired. When I learn the Gemara once, no, I don't want to do Chazara now. Isn't that true? I could sit and talk for 5 hours, I don't get tired. But after I learn half an hour, I start yawning. Why would God do that to the neshama? So when it comes into the body, he goes after the physical pleasures. Why? Because the body came from dust, right? And he goes after physical pleasures that come from dust. And this physical body of a person actually doesn't feel godliness. The whole physical world hides godliness. Why would God do that? You're going to see later on that actually the rabbis had no word for the descent of the neshama, how bad it comes down. It says it's as if you take the neshama from Igra Rama, from the highest peak, and you throw it, it's called Bebira Amikta, in the lowest pit. It's an expression that Chassidus says. Igra Rama Lebira Amikta. God took the neshama from the highest peak and he threw it in the lowest pit. Sounds like ISIS. Maybe not as bad. But why would God do that? So look what it says. Maybe you're going to say, you know what? So he gives us different pleasures. So instead of enjoying God, I enjoy steak. Not so bad, So let's see what it says. If you guys, you have 50 minutes to go, but please be honest with me. If you don't like these things, we change it to something as much easier. Again, it says if you take all the pleasures of the world are worthless compared to the godliness that the neshama enjoyed before it came down to this world. Let's see what. Imagine a guy wouldn't live 70 years, 80 years, 90 years. Imagine a guy would live 1,000 years and he would live in tranquility, in security. By a melech hamlachim, he was the king of kings. Take a guy that is king of kings. He's not lacking any physical pleasure. He has shawarma every day. He has caviar, right? He wakes up at 9 in the morning. As soon as he wakes up, the servants bring him his clothes to put on. Right? He takes hot showers, all the pleasures in the world. You know what I'm saying? Get everything. He has steaks every day. They're not even comparable to one moment of enjoying godliness. Even in the lowest level of Gan Eden, he's saying. There's actually, you have heard of Rabbi Dessler, right? Come on. In Valley Torah? No. He's a Rosh Hashiva of Gateshead. He's a very big tzaddik. Ashkenaz. So you when you guys go see your Valley Torah teachers, tell them how come Rabbi Lulayan from Chabad. You know who Rabbi Dessler is, and here you never taught us. What's going on? Complain. You don't know about Rabbi Dessler? Yeah, give us a refund. What kind of school is that? I'm just kidding. It's a very good school, by the way, honestly. It's a very both boys' school and a girls' school. So what happens is Rabbi Dessler, he was a Rosh Hashiva of Gateshead, and he says, actually, Tzemach Tzedek brings it down to, look what it says. Over there it says, let me read it inside because he brings it down. Our rabbis tell us, one moment of enjoyment in the world to come is higher from all the lives in this world. Now, when it says, is it talking about the highest level of Gan Eden or the lowest? Even in the lowest level of Gan Eden. One moment of pleasure is better than 1,000 years that you live here with all the pleasures. Now I'm going to get to Rabbi Dessler. Rabbi Dessler says, what does it say 1 hour of Gan Eden is better than Kol Chay Olam Hazeh? Say, Chay Olam Hazeh. From the entire life in this world. So it says a Gevaldige Chidush. Imagine from the time that Adam Arishon is created. It means the entire life in this world. From the beginning of creation. Get all the pleasures that Adam had. Get all the pleasures that all the people in the world had for the past 5,784 years. Take all the sicknesses, everything away. Every good moment that everybody had, from Adam Arishon to today. Put them together. You're talking about almost 6,000 years with all the pleasures that everybody had. That's what it means, Kol Chay Olam Hazeh. They don't come to one moment of Gan Eden. So you can't tell me God sent me here to give me a different type of a pleasure that He can compare to the pleasure of Gan Eden. Even if I would live here for 6,000 years and would have all the pleasures of everybody in the world, doesn't come to one moment of Gan Eden. So that makes the question bigger. Why would God do that? And we don't get all those pleasures. You have sicknesses. Look what's happening in the world. Everybody has, unfortunately, somebody in the family who's sick. Everybody has somebody in the family that passed away. I'm not kidding. A lot of us, we have members in the family that are autistic. Our parents are struggling to make money, a lot of them. Right? We can't sleep sometimes at night. You call that pleasure? In pure Persian, it's called nechama. I'm sure you learned that from your parents, right? Nechama is type of suffering. So even if you get all the pleasures of the world, it doesn't come to one moment of Gan Eden.
What is one moment in Gan Eden? How long is that?
1 second, understanding of God.
How is there time in Gan Eden?
Well, there is. It's a very good question, but there is. Do you know how we prove that? Because when the yard site of the grandfather comes, your parents say Kaddish. If there's no time there.
That's all we can do here. We're still time bound. We're still there.
Yeah, but it has an effect over there.
Man, that's because God's not spiritual. We still pray Shafri, Minchar.
No, but I'm saying, why can't I say Kaddish now when I say Kaddish on the day of his yard site?
No, because physically here, that's all.
I know, but he's in Gan Eden.
Yeah, there's nothing you can't control what's up there. You can control what's down here,
but he's not here. How could my Kaddish help him up there? That's what I'm saying.
So I'm saying on his yard site here, it would affect him up there.
Why?
That's all we can do here. We don't know what time.
Oh, so you're saying because I have no other. No,
Yeah,
they said there is time. There's a concept of time up there. They prove it from this. You have a good question, but they prove it from here that you say Kaddish at that time, and he helps the neshama. There's a concept of time up there too, somehow. Could be a lot faster, but it's a concept of time. Anyways, the Kalva Chomer Gan Eden Ha'elon. How much more so if you're talking about the highest level of Gan Eden? So whether the pleasure of one moment is worth more than all the pleasure in this world. Asherin Gan Eden Atachton Lorech Klal. Now, when you go to a higher level of Gan Eden, the lower level of Gan Eden is like nothing compared to that. Take 1 plus 1 is 2 and compare that to calculus, which I never learned. I don't even know what it is. I got lost in geometry. But again, I'm not even comparing, just imagine 1 plus 1 is 2 and go to calculus. Can't even compare. Now, do you know how distance is the higher level of Gan Eden than the lower level of Gan Eden? You know, Neshama go higher and higher. When the Neshama wants to go from the lower level of Gan Eden to the higher level of Gan Eden, he can't. It's too much for him. He has to go through purification. We're not talking about going from Gehenna to Gan Eden. He's already in Gan Eden, he's in a very holy place. But when he wants to go from the lower level to a higher level, he has to forget what he knew in the lower level, because that will disturb him if he's going to go to a higher level. Look what it says. There is an imaginary, spiritual river in Gan Eden. There's no water. It's just called Nahar Dinor. It's called like a river of Dinor. He has to go through that to forget what he was in the lower level of Gan Eden. He has to forget. Just like when we go from this world to Gan Eden, I can't enjoy God because my mind is filled up with physical ideas. How could I be connected to God, which is totally spiritual? So I have to go through purification. Whether that is Gehenna or whatever it is, all the dirt that is in my head gets cleaned up, and then I could be attached to God. So the lower level of Gan Eden is like, shtusim, like nonsense, if I could say such a word, compared to higher level of Gan Eden. So he has to go through this river to get cleansed. Like when I'm Tom, I have to go to a mikvah to become cleansed. Good.
You could, in Gan Eden, you could go to a higher level.
Of course.
You have a choice to.
No, you don't have a choice. You go to the level that you deserve based on what you did in this world.
From that level, you could go up.
You have to go, otherwise you're going to get bored. Imagine you repeat first class every year, grade 1. So over there you have to go higher, not to get bored.
Isn't Gan Eden in this world?
Gan Eden doesn't take any space. Tzaddikim here feel Gan Eden is a state of mind.
Won't they say in the Marat Machpelah, Gan Eden is the entrance to Gan Eden?
I don't know what that means. It's a good question.
What does it say between the rivers of like Euphrates and the Nile?
Gan Eden used to be there, but once Adam sinned, godliness went away from this world. But it's a good question. I don't have a clear answer to that. So we see that for him to go from Gan Eden Atacht on the lower level of Gan Eden to the high level of Gan Eden, he has to go through that river. Why? I'm sorry. So it shouldn't get disturbed in the higher Gan Eden. Just like when you go from this world to Gan Eden, even to a lower level of Gan Eden, he has to forget the image of this world. The image of this world, because it's very physical. If I'm going to go with that limitation to Gan Eden, I can't understand godliness. The pleasures of the lower level of Gan Eden are like machshava zara, bad thoughts, compared to Gan Eden Elyon. So imagine somebody's neshama that comes from high level of Gan Eden, comes into physical body. So anybody that is intellectual, which includes all you guys, you're a bunch of intellectual people. If he's going to start to imagine, what a great pleasure the highest level of Gan Eden is. Even the lower level of Gan Eden is like nothing compared to that. And it says there are many levels in Gan Eden, not just 2. Generally, there is 2 levels. Lower level of Gan Eden, the higher level. But really, there is zillions of levels in between. Even if you look in books of Musar or Chassidus, only says there are 2 levels in Gan Eden. We have received from our teachers that are really, really holy. It says to these tzaddikim the paths of heaven was open to them. They knew what's happening in the spiritual world. Shesh madrigus lein ketz. There is infinite amounts of levels in Gan Eden. Asher kol achas me'ula ma'ila ma'ila mibchinas shel lamata memenu. And each level is higher than the lower level. V'al derech shamru razal, like if you guys have learned Gemara Chagiga, it says ragla achayus keneget kulan. When you talk about the legs of the angels, is higher than all the lower world. I mean, ragla achayus. I don't think angels have feet. What means the lower level of angel? It's like completely higher than the lower levels. This is in Gemara Barachos, I think. Also another Gemara, it says Talmid Chachamim never rest. Not in this world, not in the world to come. Because in this world they constantly learn. And when they go to Gan Eden, they constantly go higher. What does that mean? Because in Gan Eden you have zillions of worlds. In this world, Torah has no end. So no matter how much they learn, they could even learn more. They go higher and higher to enjoy God. You guys have another 5 minutes? He's going to, from here, he proved to us that really doesn't make sense. Why would God send an Hashem to such a low level? And don't tell me because we have beautiful pleasures here. The pleasures here are like garbage. Even if you would have thousands of years, 6,000 years of pleasure from all the people that had pleasure in this world, doesn't come to one moment of Gan Eden. So why would God send me to here, which is garbage? Now he brings another one. This story actually is a very, very weird story, people. And he actually shows us what a great pleasure Gan Eden is. So it says, on page 8, we're going to do one more paragraph only, and we're going to leave the answer for next week. So it says, you want to have flogas v'goydel erech iridazu, eich shehi. You understand how really terrible seemingly is this coming down to this world. Here's the expression that we said before. Me'igra Rama, from the highest peak, lebira amikta, to the lowest pit. Al derech acher, you're going to find it in a different way. You guys know who Acher was? Elisha ben Avuya? Okay. Elisha ben Avuya was the teacher of Rab Meir. So the Gemara says he was a very smart man. He was the teacher of Rab Meir. Rab Meir was one of the smartest Tanoim. So you could imagine whose teacher Elisha ben Avuya was. So one day, he was sitting in a Ginosa where the Kinneret is, and he sees on Shabbos, one guy goes on a tree and plucks a fruit. Comes down, nothing happens to him. Then he saw there was another kid that his father told him, go on the tree and please bring me some eggs. Like, bird eggs, whatever it is. The guy waits till Shabbos is over. And then he goes on the tree and he actually makes the mother fly. And then he takes the eggs. He did the mitzvah of listening to his father and also making the bird fly. What's the reward of making the bird fly? Long life. What's the reward of honoring your parents? Long life. As soon as he came down, he slipped over a stone and he fell down and he died. You remember that? So he said, where is the Torah and its reward? The whole thing doesn't make sense. He became non-religious. The first thing that he did, he went to a very ill-reputed woman, very, very lowly woman, and he asked to do an Avera. So the lady came and said, what? You're Elisha. You want to do a sin with me? He says, no, I'm not Elisha. And I prove it to you. On Shabbos, he plucked out radishes from the ground. So you must be Acher, somebody else. And since then, he changed his name from Elisha to Acher. So now he was such a wicked person that the Gemara says in Chagiga, when he died, there was they didn't let him to go to Gan Eden. They didn't let him go to Gehenna. Forgive me. To go to Gehenna, you have to have a merit. That means you could be cleansed. Gehenna is not a place, that the devil stands with a fork, makes holes in you. It's not what it is. It's actually a rectification or a purification. Somebody is that bad, that means he's like so dirty that there's no way to rectify him. Even he can't go to Gehenna. That's really bad. So Rab Meir goes on his grave, because Rab Meir loved him, he was his teacher. And he says, I swear to you, when I die, I'll make sure you go to Gehenna. So when Rab Meir died, the fire came, smoke, on the grave of Elisha ben Avuya. they knew that he went to Gehenna. So now, Rab Meir, when he passed away, Rabbi Yochanan, I think it was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. I think it was one of the Rabbi Yochanans. So he says, what's a big deal to go to Gehenna? Come on. I promise when I die, he's going to go to Gan Eden. Now, usually a person goes to Gehenna for 12 months maximum. He wasn't allowed in Gehenna. Because Rabbi Meir prayed, he ended up going to Gehenna, right? Until Rabbi Yochanan died, it says it was decades. I don't know how many years. 60, 70, 80 years. This poor guy was being punished in Gehenna for so many years. And then after that, he was allowed to go to the lowest level of Gan Eden. Now the Gemara asks the question, was it worth it for him to suffer so much? As you know, 1 hour of Gehenna is worse than 70 years of suffering in this world. I'm talking about the guys that are suffering now in the war. You know, in the tunnels and they're bleeding. Just look at suffering. 70 years of suffering in this world doesn't even come up to 1 hour of Gehenna. So look what it says. Was it really worth it for him to go to Gan Eden? The Gemara says it was worth it to suffer so much to go to the lowest level of Gan Eden. So could you imagine how great the pleasure of Gan Eden is? It was worth it for Acher. 70, 80 years he was in Gehenna. 60 years at least he was in Gehenna. And 1 hour of that is worse than 70 years of suffering in this world. My math is not good. Make the calculation. So look what it says. Shamru Razal be'acher, people said regarding Acher, mutav de ledaine, was worth for him to get judged so much, v'leisa la'alma da'ati, so he could come to the world to come. V'ratza lomar, which level of world to come? Afilu legan eden atachton, even in the lowest level of Gan Eden. V'hine, hadin v'yisurim shel Gehenna merubim v'gdolim mod. It says the punishment of Gehenna is very scary, it's very, very bad. K'moshkasu b'geres hatshuva v'shem Ramban. So it says the Alter Rebbe, first of Chabad, in his book, Igeres hatshuva brings it down. Shegam Yisure Iyuv Ain Shana. 70 years that Iyuv suffered. If somebody would suffer like Iyuv for 7 years, I'm sorry. Einon Kedeh Afilu Neged Shachas Begenam. They don't even reach the suffering of Gehenna for 1 hour. Omishpat Hashem Begenam, Yud Beis Chodesh Hashem, Yosef, Yud Beis Chodesh Hashem. What is this? Yosef Mishmara V'Karov Letisha. Oh, Elef Shos. I see. It says the 12 months that you're in Gan Eden is close to 8,000 or 9,000 hours. Right, 1 year, I guess that's 8,000, 9,000 hours. Whatever it is, 365 times 24. Make the calculation. So Reshaim are in Gehenna for 12 months. 1 hour of Gehenna is worse than 70 years of suffering of Iyuv. And it says the worst Rasha is in Gehenna for 12 months, which is like 9,000 hours. That's pretty scary. When Acher died, when Rab Meir was alive, Rab Meir was before Hashem Baruch Hu. As the Rambam writes it down. The Tosfos Yom Tov, also Tosfos Yom Tov writes it down. Perikama Dishvus, Sharabba Shel Rebbe. It says Hashem Baruch Hu was a teacher of Rebbe. Sharabba Shel Rabbi Yochanan, Sherich Shamim Harbe. And Rebbe was the teacher of Rabbi Yochanan that lived for a long time. He's not Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He's the regular Rabbi Yochanan. So could you imagine Rab Meir was a teacher of Rashbi. Rashbi was a teacher of Rebbe. Rebbe was teacher of Rabbi Yochanan. When Rabbi Yochanan died, the smoke stopped. So he was decades in Gehenna. It's worth it for him to have, I don't know, 60 years times 9,000 hours being in Gehenna. So he should go to the lowest level of Gan Eden. Seul Mat, go and learn. Kama nifla haflu pelegam ma'alas Gan Eden atachton. What a great pleasure is the lowest level of Gan Eden. Asher kedai ukedai b'toiva meruba v'niflat mod. What a great pleasure that is. Gam lizbol yisurim kol kach b'shvila bilvad. Just to go through so many years of suffering in Gehenna, just to get to lower level of Gan Eden. Shenze benoik v'tanu golam hazeh gam lizbol yisurim muatim b'shvila v'yem Elohein. Would you want to go through 7 years of suffering to come to this world and have some stakes? Of course not. So you could imagine, how great Gan Eden is. So why would God send us from such a great place of pleasure, bring us to this, pretty bad world, physical world, that even if you live for 6,000 years and enjoy yourself, Doesn't come to one moment of Gan Eden. Good question, very strong question. Bezrat Hashem, we find the answer next week. If you guys don't like it, please